Well, Halito, it's Red Hoop Talk. It is I, Jennifer Robin, and we are doing stuff and things today. We are reintroducing, let's say, the Association on American Indian Affairs president, chiefess. What do we say here? Welcome, Shannon, to the program. You are live.
I love that introduction, Jennifer. That was awesome. As I'm burning the house down over here.
Yes. Well, I think we all need to light our smudge all at once at a certain time and see if we can get some things going.
Well, interestingly enough, Jennifer, the Association on American Indian Affairs is bringing back its #ShareHealing work. So Kim Metler is our Next Generations director, and she oversees all the children and family programs at the association. And so she's going to roll it out of her department. And really, it's a time where, on a certain day a week and at a certain time, we're going to ask everyone to come together wherever they are and just, spend 5 minutes sending out good energy to the people who need it the most right now. We started that back during COVID and then kind of let it go when we all started getting healthy and stopped using our Brady Bunch boxes to talk to each other all the time. And so we're going to be rolling that out again to do just that very thing, so we can come together and send out good vibes, good energy, good prayer, whatever you want to call it.
When it snaps you out, making that time snaps you out of your own blah, 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 and your personal stuff to kind of focus on, something bigger and put something positive out instead of adding to that to-do list. Oh,
Yes, that's so important for what we're all going through right now. I think just everything is
well, it feels
disconnected. Everything's just all it's crazy.
Well, it feels so uncertain and on the real, because I'm middle-aged and I was born before the internet, and I learned looking back towards my relatives and ancestors, I find myself fighting a fear that I haven't felt really ever, but going dark, going silent, going quiet, tiptoeing, don't make waves, prove you're an American. You know what I mean? Like, it's this weird, just past couple days, like fighting that, welp, we've survived it before. So instead of walking out triumphantly in my life, I feel that generational trauma of play nice, be quiet, don't argue, don't speak up, don't talk. You know what I mean? That deep survival mode.
Yeah, that's how I was talking to one of our interns today, and she was talking about the history of like land rights and land dispossession. And I said, hey, we got to talk about the times where it wasn't a negative, because everything wasn't a negative. And I think in Native country, we're so programmed to what's coming at us all the time. And we forget the positive stories, the stories that are meant to strengthen us, the stories that our elders still talk about. Those are the things we've got to get reconnected with. And we've got to start talking about how we know how to survive this and how we know how to fight what's coming at us. We've got strong prayers, we've got strong medicine, and we've just got to use it and rely on it and stop all this bullshit talking. Well, they're doing this to us. It's like, no, we got freaking sovereignty. Let's freaking use it, right? I don't know what that means. It's easier to say that than actually.
Well, and speaking of positive and change, since we are now sharing podcast platforms with the world, I want to kind of get a foundation of the association, because it was formed before Native people were dual citizen Americans. And that is a huge positive force that has managed to stick around for 100+ years. So give us the lowdown.
Yeah, sure. And, I didn't do a very good intro myself coming in, so maybe I should actually say something about who I am. Hello, everyone. My name's Shannon O'Loughlin. I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. And Jennifer and I are probably cousins somewhere back then. I'm serving as the CEO and attorney for the Association on American Indian Affairs, and I started this gig um, uh, in 2017, in September 2017. So I've been going at this for over 7 years, and I wanted to work for the association so badly because I saw the history and the work that they were doing and was really surprised how no one really knew about the work of the association over the last 100 years. And it started as a differently named organization under leadership of folks like John Collier, who became kind of non-native allies in the federal government for Native country, back in the 20s and 30s. But back then, one of the first things that the organization did was work to protect Pueblo lands from basically adverse possession. So the New Mexico state citizens were coming into Pueblo lands and trying to hostile take over the lands. And there was a bill called the Bursum Bill that was going to give those thieves access and title to those lands. And so the association worked on the ground with the Pueblo Council of Governors, who had been formed by them, worked on the ground and between the Southwest and Washington, D.C. to stop the Bursum Bill and to protect those Pueblo lands and the treaty rights that were recognized by Spain. The U.S. then recognized those treaty rights as well for Pueblo people. So that was one of the initial big pieces of work that the association did, was to protect those lands. But if you can think about what was happening in the 1920s to Native people, right? We were in the depths of boarding schools. So the boarding school policy had been going on, about 50 years or so. So our children were being continued to brought into these schools and then graduating out of them. And a lot of them working for non-Native people and with non-Native families and completely separate from their people, their culture. They'd been assimilated. Language was going down. And of course, our land loss allowed our lands to be opened for anyone to come and pillage. So there was a lot of work that those initial founders had to do to really shift what federal policy was headed towards, because it was all about assimilation and genocide at that time.
Were
right?
Natives even aware of their treaty rights? Like, was that something knowledge that was freely spread about, or was it just kind of, if they don't bring it up, we're not going to bring it up type of
No, I think it was known, and there were other organizations that were around before the association, and Native people who, just like we've done with everything else, we carried on those traditions about our treaties and what they were supposed to provide for us. And those stories were passed down among our various leadership. So yeah, we were still arguing treaties. We were still arguing against people looting our lands and our sacred places. We were making all those arguments, but our voices were very weak. Because
what I understand is we couldn't even testify in court if something was done to us. So I guess that's why it's hard for me to imagine like us fighting for rights without non-Native allies, because we, you said voices weak, and I didn't even think we had one.
Well, we had to have, we had to have, because we're still here. Right? I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding. we're still here, but you're right. And it was, when the association was first developed, it was mostly non-native individuals, Ooh, I like that lighting. That's
Thank you.
much nice. Non-natives who had the power and who had the relationships in federal and state governments to help advocate for Native people. But what I thought and still think is incredible about the association is, even back then in the 1920s, our allies knew how to work with Native peoples, knew how to consult with them and respect them, and their traditional values. And so a lot of the work that was done, of course, we do it differently today, but it was, I mean, because that work, for example, like the Indian Reorganization Act, which, people don't necessarily care for as much today, or the Alaska Native Settlement Claims Act, people kind of look at differently at that today than they did back then. But that work was done hand in hand with Native people on the ground and the association's advocates. As time went on, we became more Native, and in the 90s, became a completely Native organization. So everyone on the board, right, was a Native person. And we kicked the non-Natives off the board. I think they're still pissed at us for doing that.
Well, no, you're allowed to be the scaffolding of your own voice. I think that, I know there's a lot of good intended, big-hearted people out there that do want to help, but you have to like let us have our thing. Let us ask for help. Don't just come tell us what we need to do. Let us, advertise, hey, we need help with ABCD.
Exactly. Hey, I want to give a shout out to Mystical Alan Bay, who just watched my interview with Joe Rogan, which was back in, what was that, 2020. That's what actually started Red Hoop Talk, was that interview. By the way, I was interviewed on the Joe Rogan Experience, and let me tell you, that was one of the worst experiences in my entire life.
No, you said that to me before, which makes me not want to watch it. I'm like, oh, what did they do to my friend? So how did that even start? I thought Joe Rogan just did celebrities. Are you a secret celebrity?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm certainly not getting any royalties for it, if I am. But I got a call from his booker just out of the blue, and I actually was trying to convince him to use other individuals, and he kept asking me questions. He's like, "No, I think you'll do." And I'm like, "Great." I didn't even know who Joe Rogan was at the time, except for Fear Factor. I remembered Fear Factor, right? Do you remember that thing where people were like in a glass case full of bugs and stuff, and they had to or eat bugs? I don't. Anyway, so I started looking into this Joe Rogan Experience, and you should have saw the pages and pages of notes that I brought with me to be completely prepared for that discussion. And I guess what was disappointing about it for me was that Joe Rogan didn't seem to really want me there. We asked if he would want to smudge with us, so we could just say a prayer or put out good thoughts for a good show. He wouldn't participate. I then gave him the sage that we used for that prayer and smudging. He used that sage on a later show, going, "Look, a real Indian gave me this sage. We're gonna," so that kind of bullshit, right? But what was horrible, it was really uncomfortable just because I'd never been in a situation like that, and I didn't know what to expect or what the questions were going to be about. And what really sucked about it is afterwards there was so much hate. in his comments on YouTube. Man, if you go there, I'm called Elizabeth Warren and Pocahontas and worse things. I mean, it was just horrible, and it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was, I guess, kind of made me feel like I did not do a good job. So I was really happy. There was a lot of people that gave me good feedback and were grateful that I did it, but it was not fun. those
Well,
that
but it made
testosterone that he brings to the table
but it
is not.
made you want to start Red Hoop Talk, and that was what, just to be nice to people you talk to?
No, it was to talk about the
Tell 'em
issues
how
that,
it's fun.
right, that we think are important. Because the things that people like Joe Rogan think are important are not the things that we talk about, are not the things that worry us, that keep us up at night. And so I wanted to create a space, a safe space, where we could come in and we could joke and have fun, but we could also get serious and try to be educational about information, and to let people get to know folks all around Native country who are doing good work.
I really appreciate being brought into this because I utilize it as a safe space, to be honest and ask human-led questions, right? And curiosity. But yet here we are, first show of this year, and I find myself holding my breath. Because now it lives forever on YouTube. Before, when when I'm only on FM, 2 weeks later it disappears unless I put it somewhere, right? So if I say something or I'm quoted, prove it. 2 weeks later, it's gone. So stepping into this, knowing that there's so many angry, hate-filled people, it rolls around in the back of my head the past few weeks as I put my voice out there. So I'm glad you're this year's first guest, because you're my safety blanket. Like, I didn't say it, Shannon did.
I'm happy to take the heat. It's not comfortable. I'm getting better at it with age. If I did Joe Rogan now, I think I'd be a much better interviewee than I was then. But such is life. I've got my FAFO shirt on today, fuck around and find out, to give me inspiration for these
Yes.
times. I do believe that is a personal motto. And I don't know what to say, Jennifer. I do know that we've got to be able to choose our battles, right? We've got to be able, because not everything we should be fighting out. Stop it on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and all that. We're only talking to, that vacuum of people that the algorithm feeds our messages, or our messages are getting taken down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not where we need to talk. I think we need to relearn how to come together in person, or by using things like Zoom and what have you, and really educating one another, keeping each other apprised of what's happening, that we really build our communities together, reconnect with people, know who the people are that you interact with on a daily basis when you go to the store, and smile, right? Smile and see if people smile back. Wear your shirt and smile and see if people smile back. Know who you might need to connect with if something weird's going down. I've been seeing these a few TikToks recently about things you can do if you see I hate to say I know I'm finding myself like struggling and censoring myself. Like, yeah,
It's
I
just it's this weird, not
like,
even trying to be conscious of it feeling, right? Where you start to be like, oh, I think this. And then something inside goes, don't think what you want. Don't say it.
and if I say something like ICE enforcement, is that going to like, all the little YouTube bots are going to come and, but there's that stuff happening, and there are things that we can do to help protect our relatives, our Indigenous relatives. If we think that's happening around us, there are things that we can say and go into places of business and, give warning and support to, so I invite everyone to kind of look for those things, ways that we can help each other in public, ways that we can stay safe. Our brothers and sisters who are shaded darker than me are also being told to make sure you carry around your tribal ID. Don't leave home without your freaking ID. You know, um,
I'm in California. That's like a legitimate concern of mine, is being clumped into some kind of raid because I'm at Walmart or something. I don't know.
and don't go to Walmart.
Is Target safe? Is Target safer? I don't know.
I,
But okay, the association has withstood a bunch of insanity over a century. So I'm going to sink into that. And I feel that like conversations with you where knowledge becomes power, right? Knowing what rights are, knowing that treaties still exist, knowing that there's people like you who understand the system. So I guess as this comes, everything that you're doing this year, I automatically feel, is that threatened? Is that threatened? So repatriation and your conference over the next 4 years, have the efforts you've put in over the past 4 years, 7 years, be undone? Are we just going to have to tread water?
Right now, it's not clear. I think the biggest concern I have is how the new administration is going to start opening up, or if they're going to start opening up public lands, federal lands, and even tribal lands, with some sort of pretend executive authority, or by other force. I don't know what that's going to look like. It's hard to tell. I've been trying to go through the executive order after executive order after executive order that is kind of, killed a lot of the Biden and Obama DEI work. There's even an executive order that supported tribal colleges that's been terminated. So, we're all trying to watch to see which direction things are coming from. And we just don't know. And our biggest fear is, of course, developing land without any of the regulatory framework that includes Native nations and consultations and allow us to be involved in any mitigation or removal of archaeological or other, ancestors from lands. I think those are our biggest concerns. And then another concern for us at the association is we've worked real hard with our tribal partners to get the Safeguard Tribal Objects of Patrimony Act passed. And Biden passed that act in December 22, I think it was. And that act, what it does is it prevents our cultural heritage from being exported out of the country where we can't get hold of it anymore, where we can't protect it. And it came out of this long story back in 2016 about the theft of the Acoma Pueblo shield. And so if y'all want to go and Google that, you can learn more about how that law kind of came into place. But over the last year, tribal advocates and the association have been working on the regulations for that law so it can be implemented. And unfortunately, they didn't get done. They didn't get done before the change in administration. So we think that the STOP Act is just going to do nothing for the next 4 years. That means potentially dealers and collectors can continue to export sensitive cultural heritage, sell it in France because it's easy to do it in France. All those crazy French people loving Indians, wanting our cultural heritage, wanting our religious items. And so I think, even though we may have lost some momentum that a more positive administration has given us in the past, there are still other things we can do. It's not like all hope is lost, right? We can educate people. We have allies in France. We can educate them. We can educate their press about not purchasing Native cultural heritage items. I mean, we can, there's a lot we can do, and the association is involved in to try to help people understand why it's important to protect our cultural heritage and how it got to auction in the first place, right? Through theft and through looting.
Well, you mentioned to me before, like, if I thought kind of finders keepers, or after X amount of years, even if you stole something, it's yours. And kind of what I understand is, like, once it's stolen, it's always stolen.
Yeah, a thief cannot pass good title. So unless you have notice that item is somewhere, if you have noticed that an item is somewhere, then you have to act, right? You have to act on it. You can't just let it, oh, there's our item that was stolen, and not do anything about it. That's the thing that will prevent you from suing to get that item back. That will start this, what they call the statute of limitations. So how long a violation is available to bring to court for a remedy. So, if an item is stolen, we have to act on it. And we can't let it go. So, that's all. We just have to.
I just find a lot of these things shocking. Like, I knew this Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. I figured, like, oh, they just made it because they wanted to teach people about the American Indian. I had no idea that this museum was brought about because there was a horde of thousands of our ancestors in a basement.
Yeah, that German guy who really liked Indians, George Gustav High, started that at the American Indian Museum in New York City. I think that was back in the 1920s as well. So about that same time. And so that was, he would send, though you don't see a lot of this history on the National Museum of the American Indians website. They kind of give the more positive point of view of that story. But he was just a looter and a robber, and he'd work with archaeologists, anthropologists. He'd pay them to go dig up graves and bring things back. There was even a story of a Native person who had passed away as part of at the Smithsonian, and how they faked the ceremony for their family and then kept the body themselves, right? I mean, just horrid shit, right, about what happened out of that institution. And in the 70s, that institution was investigated by the New York State Attorney General because it was just this, you come in, you trade an object, and then you're a collector and you can go sell it. So it wasn't acting like a museum. It wasn't acting like it held public trust. It was acting just like a
gift shop.
market. Yeah, as a gift shop. Exactly. And so the National Museum of the American Indian and the legislation that came from bringing that horrible institution into the Smithsonian actually was the first piece of repatriation legislation that required the Smithsonian, not just at the National Museum of the American Indian, but also at the National History Museum, that they had to repatriate ancestors and cultural items. And I think it was actually at the National Museum of Natural History where a lot of Congress members visited and saw the amount of ancestors that were in boxes in their basement at the Natural History Museum.
Now, I like your juicy brain. Now, the term repatriation, you said, comes from war. Comes from is a battle term. So explain that to us.
Yeah, it's a repatriation is a term that Native advocates kind of acculturated for these purposes, and the meaning of it, if you look at the dictionary definition, is about the return of someone who's passed on overseas, and you're returning their body to their home country. So it was often a term used to repatriate soldiers who had died in other countries back to the United States. And so Native advocates used that term because they felt that that's exactly the same thing that we had going on. All of our ancestors had been ripped from us. All our culture had been ripped from us as an act of war, an act of violence, and that the remedy was repatriation, returning them back home in the same way you would return someone who had fought in war. So,
well, if you put it in perspective, if there was some museum in, I don't know, weird France, because apparently they like dead things, if they found thousands of American citizens in a basement, there it would just be a shit show. It would be international news, blah, 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 right? But for some reason, when you frame things in American Indian warfare, it just seemed to be more dismissed. So when you put it in that context, to have thousands of our ancestors who fought for us to be here today, it's mind-blowing. The level of disrespect really kind of comes out. It's not a relic anymore. It's a soldier.
Yeah. And when you look at some of these institutions, which were the greatest hoarders, it's really incredible. I mean, the total numbers that we know about domestically, which have been reported to the National NAGPRA program, I think are 212,000 or 220,000 individuals, ancestors' remains in museums. And about half of those, maybe a little bit more, have been repatriated. So in the last 34 years, half of the work has been done. And so a lot of the problems with repatriation work under this law that was not the NMAI Act, because that's different, but then a new law was passed in 1990 called the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And that law set forward provisions that required museums and federal agencies to repatriate ancestors and other cultural heritage. In a museum, what's good about this law is museum is defined really broadly. So think about it not as your traditional museum, but a museum is any institution that has Native American collections. So you could have a Native American item on your wall in your foyer, and you've received federal funding. You could be a museum and you may be required to repatriate that mask that's on your wall. It was meant to apply very broadly. Unfortunately, Congress didn't provide a remedy when a private collector held the same items that are protected that a museum or a federal agency might have. So that's the hole in NAGPRA that we're working to still fill.
Jeez. So let's talk a little bit about your upcoming February repatriation. Repatriation. I hear that word in my sleep now. Conference, and has the itinerary of your conference changed a little bit based on the new administration? So what are you guys doing next month and where?
Well, so next month, February, someone called Hey just said Shannon is a good white lady. Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. You suck. Thank you for judging me on my appearance, I guess is what I should say.
No, you're only like a brilliant legal scholar, but let's focus on your looks because that's easier to digest.
Yeah, that's cool. So February 25, 26, and 27 at Tunica Biloxi Tribe's Paragon Resort is going to be where our repatriation conference is located. You can go to indian-affairs.org in our events page and find out more information about the repatriation conference. It's our 10th annual. It's going to be all in person. It's going to be intensive training on the new NAGPRA regulations. So I talked about NAGPRA, the law that was passed in 1990, and that about maybe half of the repatriation has been done in over 30 some odd years. So the regulations were completely redone because there were museums taking advantage of the loopholes in those old regulations. So new regulations were passed that has really allowed and picked up the repatriation work. So folks like Harvard Peabody that have just been so out of compliance with NAGPRA and so arrogant about being out of compliance with NAGPRA, they're finally doing this work, and we're seeing Federal Register notices of repatriations happening on a good, consistent basis, which is good. So those things are working. So we're going to be talking about the new NAGPRA regulations. We're going to be doing intensive training about it. We're going to be talking about international repatriation and illicit trafficking. We'll be talking about the Safeguard Tribal Objects of Patrimony Act that prevents the exportation of cultural heritage out of the country. And we'll be having some fun too. There's a movie night. We've got a funny repatriation movie, if you can imagine. And we have a cultural event on the Wednesday night. We've got some great keynote speakers. Abigail Echohawk is one of them, whom I'm sure a lot of people know. She's a great speaker. We also have Chip Caldwell, who's done a TED Talk on repatriation, who was the former curator and director at the Denver Museum of Natural History, which has been a really mostly positive institution when it's come to repatriation. So there's going to be some really good people to network with. We always have private rooms available so people can have meetings, because we'll have federal agencies there, museums are there, and tribes are there. And by the way, if you're a Native Nation representative, you can attend for free at our conference. Yes.
So is this like an Indigenous only focus thing, or can allies and anybody interested in this stuff sign up and attend?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone can participate with us. It's highly technical, but what we hope is through the NAGPRA regulations training that everyone will get up to a good, strong level of practice and be able to utilize that once they leave the conference. So definitely if someone's involved in cultural heritage and or wants to work in this area, I think it'd be a really great conference to attend.
Well, so is the Association on American Indian Affairs against museums?
Yes. No, we're not. No, we're not against museums. What we're against is how museums have been part of the continuation of our demise, how museums have represented us as something only historic instead of present and contemporary and strong, right? Most museums you go into and you see an item behind glass with a label, and that's it, right?
From a faraway time and place.
Yes, exactly. And you know nothing about Native people, so it's no wonder that there's so many people in our country that don't even think Native people exist. They see me as a good white lady instead of understanding who I am as a cultural person and a human being connected to my Choctaw Nation. You just see what this looks like, right? There's a great exhibit at the National Museum of the American Indian. And as you walk in, there's a, if they still have this exhibit, there's this panel of pictures of all sorts of different people, different looking people, and they're all Native. And the diversity in Native country is just so vast. Everywhere in the country, we look different. And you know, I don't know what point I was trying to make. I think I lost my point, Jen.
Well, okay, so there is a good way to curate and honor us. Because again, I'm in California, I'm in gold country. So there wasn't even attempts to save culture around here. It was it so there's a lot of celebration on the taming of the West and the final frontier and the resources, right? And all these things. And there's a ton of Hispanic Mexican kids that don't realize how native they are. Oh, and how California used to be Mexico. Oh, and how many indigenous people are still in Mexico. So it's extremely whitewashed, and the history is tilted towards the victor.
Oh, always. I love that. There's this great quote where it's an African proverb, I think. Tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter, right? Because the lion doesn't get to say what his position was, and that's how our histories have been told. And even when I was on that Joe Rogan show, you know, you know, he was talking about a non-native author that he really liked. That was a story about kind of native warrior culture that Joe Rogan liked so much, but it was a non-native author. And now native authors enjoyed native people enjoyed his work, but there was no native voice in that book whatsoever. So it was all done with just the historic written record. Well, who was in control of that written record? And creating that written record. So any non-Indigenous author who's working to really uplift Native peoples, if they're not working directly with Native peoples, then their shit is worthless. You know, so I love museums. I love non-Native authors, but if they're not working with us, then they don't have the whole story. And there's so many stories I have of that.
Well, you're making an assumption. You're making an assumption based on your interpretation of something. And that's not academia. That's not proper.
And with limited experience, right? Because think about all of those cultural items and ancestors that have been removed from the ground and in museums. Museums didn't even know what they have. And it wasn't until NAGPRA and they started bringing in Native nations and consulting with them that they finally learned, oh my gosh, this was worn by so-and-so who did a ceremony, who blah, you know. And when they realized how spiritually and culturally important these items were, most museum curators gladly return these types of items. And of course, they're just sitting, and it's not like the museums are doing anything with them. They're basically paying for their storage and curation, and learning nothing from them.
Yes. And even here still in California, you have to get special invitation or prove your connection to some of these items in basements to go see your great grandma's work, or to have that connection. Or I mean, these things outlive us, but we're not able to tell their story. It's weird. Oh, okay. So who is this mystical? Do you know this person? Because they're cracking me up. So our conversation on California, Mexico, and Mexicans, how many times you had to tell Joe Rogan that Mexicans are indigenous? So why is that? Why was that so hard on him? Like, why is it so hard to believe that North America indigenous people are a thing?
Yeah, well, there's so much misinformation about who we are. And one of my favorite, and where we came from, and one of my favorite books is Vine Deloria's Red Earth, White Lies, because he just has such a great way of delivering Native humor and sarcasm. And so he talks about these scientific theories that Western science has created about who Native people are without any of our input, right? Because we were here. We know how things happened, right?
Yes.
We've got the stories. We've got the monuments. We can see places in the land. And so he tells great stories in that book. And, like if you can imagine these trees, like, I'm going to blow my seeds over there to the Bering Strait land bridge so we can go live in in the Western Hemisphere. Just a great book, Red Earth, White Lies. Read that book. Read all of Vine Deloria. In fact, all of us should be reading Vine Deloria right now.
What do you want us to stop the podcast right now so we can go pick up a book? Is that what you're like? Everybody freeze.
Everyone freeze. Or give us I'd love to see on the comments people's favorite Vine Deloria book. And every once in a while, certain universities will have like Vine Deloria symposiums, right, to kind of revisit his work. And that's an individual I really look up to.
Well, and it's important to have these trusted sources, because I don't know, I've been burned. I didn't know that Native Americans could get degrees in Native American studies, because until about 2025, the only people I've known that had a degree in Native American studies were non-Native. Right.
With programs they created, right? They created the programs, and they were
and I know some that are still teaching. So I also read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States my junior year of high school, and one morning was just over it and took over history class and got expelled. So and then I got sent to the continuation school next door and became the leader of a small gang. I don't know. So it's terrifying for me to trust a lot of these resources like books or institutions or this and that. So I rely on my guests through the years, and family and friends and people like you, to say this is good and in a good way.
Well, Jen, how is this going to affect you, being a media person, a radio and podcast personality that you are? With you were talking about being scared to say certain things anymore. What is that going to mean?
I don't know. And I'm sitting with that, and I'm not going to get stuck in my fear. And I got super cool lawyer friends. And I feel that, going on my 14th year, as a media person, I need to rely and trust the people, like you said, that I've met through the years and have namaste'd my weirdness and really, I'm not alone in this. And it is so new, and I will remember the resilience and everything we have to this day is because somebody wasn't afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to lean towards that, but it still just puts me in a, am I safe? Am I safe to be? Not just as an Indigenous person, but as a woman, right? And it is new, but you're not stopping. You have no intention to stop or censor yourself or your work or mellow out or act right. So that makes me feel better about not backing down and speaking up and acting right.
Yeah.
But
I know there's going to be challenges, right? And I know we're going to have to consider everything in a different way. But I think what you said kind of encompasses everything, is to not let fear take over. All of our ancestors were brave and courageous, but you can't be brave and courageous without fear. Fear helps to drive the bravery, or fear kind of stops us dead in our tracks and makes us,
but like you said, I don't have
away.
to go fight every battle. I don't have to protest or go out against or argue with or do, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that fear is healthy in a way on, whoa, what are the consequences of this action? And a lot of things are hills I'm willing to die on, and when I think about why am I so the past few weeks, I was at Standing Rock twice for a good chunk of time, right? And we had all these efforts, all these things that were going to go away because Trump was going to take office that next year, right? So watching what everybody went through, watching the beauty of people coming together, watching all that stuff happen, it's like staring at the Death Star, and we're just little Ewoks.
Yeah. Well, so I wonder how Standing Rock feels about all of that now, considering Trump's presidency.
Well, and dealing with the majority vote. Now I'm like, okay, is what I say going to affect underwriters on my FM radio show? Has my little new age hippie all loving community, is that changed now? Like, has the mindset of the people I broadcast to over a decade, has that changed? So it's
and more Native people, voted for Trump. We don't really know.
And I respect democracy. I respect your right to do stuff, but I'm also not coming. It's weird. The anger, the entitlement, the rubble, the weirdness is what I'm not understanding this time round.
Yeah. And I don't understand it from Native country, because that's not our traditional values. And so I don't understand whose auntie is letting this happen. Which is the auntie that's in charge here, because it is not okay for people to treat other people with such callousness and hatred, just because of someone's political leanings or their gender identity or anything.
Or
how cute they are.
Or that long-standing, is it safe to not just be a woman, but an Indigenous woman or an Indigenous person?
Yeah, just to exist. It's not, is it? It's not. I have my little. I bought this great little knife that I wear around my neck now. just to kind of, remind me, even though it's, the little blade on it, it's little. I
Yeah.
probably just barely cut through someone's fry bread fat with that, around their middle. But, it reminds me that I'm safe. It something that's palpable that I can touch that helps give me that extra strength, because I do believe that we can fight against fear with truth. I believe all of those things. I believe
and
in
that's
love.
why
I
I'm like,
believe in joy.
your legal mind. I mean, I'm sure it's an asset and other things, but I'm finding it more comforting because you're not navigating an abyss of legal words and terms and all. You know what you're doing. You know what they can do. You know what we can do. So that makes me feel safer. That it's, can they do this? No, they can't do this, and we're gonna file A, B, C, D. Chillax. Okay. Can I've had questions since last year. Is our sovereignty threatened? Can Trump just say no more Bureau of Indian Affairs? We're going to absorb these people, these tribes. No more wasted money on language or Indian health or college or nothing. Is that something that can happen, or are these treaty rights built in?
Yeah, and I think with this president, anything can happen, but that doesn't mean it has the force of law, right? So he can do a lot of things. We're already seeing, I think, more than 22 states are suing him for this birthright citizenship executive order that's trying to overturn. If you're born in this country, you're automatically a citizen. Trump is trying to overturn that. Through an executive order. So, there's states, there's advocates that are really good at their jobs. It's, really dependent on organizations like the Association on American Indian Affairs, National Congress of American Indians, NARF, NICWA, all these wonderful national organizations, Native Americans in Philanthropy, Native Ways Federation, and so many others, for us to work together and with philanthropy and where the dollars are to help support the work that's going to need to be done in the next 4 years. So I'm doing my best to work with everyone so that Native country is protected. But it's not just up to me. I mean, I think we're all going to have to stand up for what we believe in. And I think it's important that we do that, because when we're unified and we show strength, maybe we're not worth messing with. It's easier over here, right? It's those of us who remain silent and kowtow to the fear. Those are the people that are just going to get, rammed. They're going to get bulldozed. So we have to. We just have to stand up and protect one another and keep each other safe.
Yes, I need to channel that Choctaw War song, not just because war is coming, but as women, we were allowed to fight along our men as a unified front, because we're not fragile, we're not weak, we're not dependent, we're not colonized. We handle our shit, Shannon.
Damn right. Damn right.
And you know what? Your little good white lady comment, part of me's like, what an idiot. But part of me is like, oh, we're all gonna hide behind her and live in her attic because she can pass. It's so terrible. I'm gonna like the native version of Anne Frank in 2 years, like living in one of your cupboards, keeping a diary.
Indian in the cupboard. Indian in the cupboard. Here we go again. All right. Yeah.
But that's them defining who we are. It's them defining what belongs to us. That's them defining how Indigenous it's okay to be. It's them making all these definitions for us and to us. And like you said, we have the power. Nothing is happening to us. we are 100 plus years along down the line and smarter, and resilience has been proven and united, and the interwebs and technology. So I didn't mean to make you my therapist, like,
No.
but I am
no,
feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling pumped.
well, and it sucks because I'm grateful. Again, age is a really has helped me a lot learn lessons. It's taken me a while, right? And so when someone says, nice white lady or whatever, I've even been in Indian country as an attorney, and tribal citizens will walk up or around me and like, who's the white lady in tribal council? Like, who's this white lady? And it's I understand that. I understand why people would do that. That's not who I am. That's who they want to be. It kind of shows more about who they are than I am. I'd much rather have someone come up to me and say, hey, I'm so-and-so. Who are you? What are you doing here?
Okay, but they say things like that. And then I've watched my super enrolled brown, God, Daddy, I hope you're not watching, make out with more white women than. No, I guess that's just why. It's just why I'm trying to understand. Years ago I interviewed who is it, the Sioux chef, and he said, white flour, white sugar are killing our Indian people, and then I had to throw in white women because I thought that was another another thing. So Lord help us. I'm not getting anything for my birthday this year. Oops.
We'll make it up to you somehow, Jen. We'll get you some Christmas presents.
But no, and that's, I think, speaking to that divisiveness we touched on. I can't remember if it was today or on Resilience Radio or here, but that's a divisiveness. You have to be this shade or below to be Choctaw. You have to be this to, that's still them. And so, yeah, now we're dividing ourselves. That's just idiotic. It's fucking stupid.
Yeah. We basically are doing what the federal government did to us. We're doing it to each other. And even with that, because there are smart tribal leaders out there who are disenrolling their citizens, who are creating factionalization among Native people and tribes. There's been this big, huge thing out of National Congress of American Indians where their tribal leadership, and I could get in trouble by saying this, but this is what everyone knows is a fact, is their tribal leadership is from the Pechanga Nation, who has practice of disenrollment. And then you have this contingency in NCAI that are trying to get rid of tribes that the NCAI has recognized for a long time, that are state recognized and not federally recognized. And so you have smart tribal leadership who are buying into who the federal government says are sovereign Native people. We should be doing that ourselves. We should be able to recognize our own nations, nations recognizing other nations, instead of us relying on the federal government to tell us who Indian is, right?
Yes.
Because we all see that differently. All our nations see that differently. We're all diverse, man. What's what's so hard about this?
Well, and even too, if you look at, further away from the equator, skin tone lightens, right, as a necessity for melanin and sun. And my dad said, I have forfeited birthday gifts for a while. Oops. Sorry, Dad. I won't pick on you anymore in public. Oh, he better be used to it. He brought me into broadcasting. So, now I don't know if this is something that can happen, but I think we talked about this before. You say my name's Shannon, I'm Oklahoma Choctaw, but really you're Mississippi Choctaw because we all came from Mississippi. So why can't there just be one Choctaw? Why are some of my relatives enrolled Mississippi and some of my relatives enrolled Oklahoma when we all come from the same taproot?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's the oppression of the federal government that has created that. But we also didn't come from Mississippi either. We came from Choctaw. We came from Choctaw, right? Those are lands that that's where the Creator wanted us, so we could have a relationship with those lands and protect those lands. And it wasn't Mississippi when we got there. Mississippi was imposed upon Native people. And so the Choctaw were the first nation to be removed by Andrew Jackson and the Removal Act. We were the first Trail of Tears migration. And that separated our people. I know there were 3 divisions in the Choctaw Nation. You may know some of this story too, but from what I understand, there were 3 divisions in the Choctaw Nation, and they all went on different migrations, but some stayed, and some stayed, dropped off during the migration. And so not only are there Mississippi Choctaw, but there's, Choctaw in Louisiana, there's Mowa Band, there's the Gina Band, and others. And then, of course, there's Oklahoma Choctaw. And the Oklahoma Choctaw were kind of seen as the official, civilized tribe, recognized and had agreed to kind of this land exchange so that we could have exclusive authority and title in this Indian country, which then, that promise went down the drain as well. But the federal government, I don't recall when they recognized Mississippi Choctaw, if it was in the 70s, I believe, but they were recognized much later, right? And then the Gina Band of Choctaw were recognized separately, and MOA has not been able to gain federal recognition. And you would think that as Choctaw people, we would be smart enough to know that if we were all one Choctaw Nation, that we might have more power, we might have more leverage, we might have more opportunities for economic development. But I think Native peoples have also bought into the kind of the Western idea of governance systems and power. And so it would be great to see us all working together. I know Mississippi and Oklahoma play stickball together, and I don't know how much more, we all kind of come together and work for our mutual benefit,
But there's still weirdness, which is like the divisiveness that you speak of. I see it because it's like, oh, you're Oklahoma, so you're less Choctaw because you're going to stay there, or like, and then the religious aspect and change. So I can understand, survival and just trying to keep your band, your clan intact, but we're in a different place now. So I think the government should fear. I mean, the same thing with slaves. You can't educate or arm slaves because they knew that if they got together and got smart, that'd be the end of it. So I think the government needs us to be fighting each other instead of fighting it.
Right. Oh, that is so perfect, Jen. That's absolutely right. I mean, and we've bought into that. We've bought into that.
But don't we have to keep our tribal governance? Doesn't it have to be done a certain way to get funding and recognition from the government?
No, and that was the Indian Reorganization Act that was passed in the 1930s. Did a couple of things. It stopped the allotment process, so allotment of lands stopped with that act, but it also recognized Native Nation governance systems and kind of gave them a Western template to follow. And they also recognized a separate federal tribal corporation to do business and to support economic development. So it was kind of an interesting piece of law. The thing is it still had that kind of patriarchal shit on top of it. So if you wanted to write your own constitution, the Secretary of Interior would have to approve it, right? But that's all been dissolved. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of Native nations that have their old 1930s constitution and provisions that allow for BIA and the Secretary of Interior to interlope in that governance, when we could easily just kick them the hell out and be our true sovereigns. So some of that is stuff that we have held on to. In fact, there's some Native nations I've worked with that they feel more comfortable working under the BIA than taking the power for themselves, because we've been so freaking oppressed and shut down.
Yeah, because if you don't do it their way, you're going to lose it.
Yeah. But now
there's so much internal distrust that if you don't do it this way, you're just going to fuck it up because you're Indian. What do you know?
Yeah. I know. We've got so much work to do to we're passing down intergenerational trauma, and a lot of work that the association, we've been around for 103 years. What we're looking to do now is not necessarily to educate the government. So this organization was kind of set up to change law and policy, though we're still going to be working on that. I think what we really need in Native country, if we're going to make permanent and headway, is to look back at ourselves and make a commitment that instead of passing down intergenerational trauma, we're going to start passing down intergenerational healing. We're going to start working together so we know how to correct the suppression and change how our governance systems work, change how we treat one another and our cousins and our sisters and our brothers in other nations, right? This is what we need to be doing.
So intergenerational trauma, but my dad's not wrong about stuff. Like we got pulled over by CHP at 11 a.m. coming back from ceremony in Nevada, and I had to watch him get an alcohol test. Like they brought so it's hard to be like, let's move on and let's change things when it's like these survival techniques that he got from his parents, who got them from their parents. They're not necessarily wrong. It's so that's kind of where I'm stuck. And yes, my father's supportive and don't live in fear and you can do this and blah, that kind of stuff. But I just default to the safety mode.
Yeah. And I am a privileged white person, right?
Yeah, but you're still a woman. So how privileged are you really? Well, you're still just a woman.
A woman with a college degree, I'm probably even more scarier. But so what you're describing is what I experienced with my grandmother. My grandmother was the person that raised me. And so I saw her in those situations and people calling her names and you're bringing that up, and it's bringing up, I'm starting to feel some of those emotions being with my grandmother, even, I can't ever pretend to know what it's like to live with dark skin and how people treat you. I mean, I've seen it, but I haven't experienced it in that way. And so I don't know, Jen. Like, this is why we need to be in community and why we need one another, because we all have these different experiences. And how else are we going to learn to do things better? And unless we know the stories. those stories of, we heard a lot during COVID, the racism that was in our police force. And it was really disappointing that our stories weren't getting out there about Native people's stories in the police force. We just weren't getting, they're still not getting out there. And
I don't have the luxury of arguing with cops. My skin tone and darker skin tones, the slave descendant skin tones, we don't have the luxury of arguing with cops. I've been with so many friends over the decades that cute little white girl gets pulled over and she starts, fuck you, what the hell? I didn't run that damn stop sign. Whereas most of us, and I learned this from my father very early, shut up, say yes sir, no sir, hand the insurance, registration, and driver's license. Don't argue. Don't say anything. Just yes, sir, no, sir. Thank you, sir. And move on your way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when you see that amplified, like we did with George Floyd and the whole other slew of police shootings for pigment, I am still just kind of stuck in, I cannot let that guard down because I still need it. And the world is obviously not proving itself safe enough to just be like, okay, with being brown.
So, yeah, I don't know
just
what
keep
the answer.
reminding me, just keep saying, Jen, I'm a lawyer, not a psychologist. Jen, I'm a lawyer. I'm about to get my dad on the program and being like, well, you're update me on all the things. How am I supposed to do this now, Father?
How are we supposed to fix this? Yeah, how are we supposed to fix this? And I don't know what the answers are. And I think this is why we just all have to talk. These are the kind of stories that if we want to post on Facebook, are the stories we need to continue to tell. We need to just keep on telling these stories because I think they have power and they need to get the light of day. And so I would say instead of us, worry about, and instead of responding to stupidity on social media and on websites, if we can actually use that energy and time to do something meaningful, man, that's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to replace scrolling and things like that for my own mental health. But I think we've got to work on how we spend our time and what's important, and tell the stories that aren't getting heard. And we just got to keep doing what we're doing. I thought it was interesting while you were talking, a part of an eagle feather that I had out here earlier was floating through the air. So, some of the little fluff that flies out, and was kind of flying here on my computer now. I don't know if that means anything, but
you know what it means? It means I'm right. We should all panic, set it on fire, and move underground. That's what that means. So
move underground. That would be the new mole people.
We came from the earth, right? We came from a mound. Maybe we just start digging our way back in. Maybe there's something good in there.
Well, I'm waiting for the UFOs. Isn't there
they don't want us anymore. We don't use enough math and science. Like, they just gave up. They're like, we did our best. You know what I mean? Like, we even, modified genetically. A few of them still didn't kick because we kept going back to the other unmodified DNA and making. So I think they're just like, this is a shit show.
Yeah, no, I think there's still this little girl inside me that's like, yes, please come and save us. Please come and save us.
And both of us were children staring at the night sky going, please abduct me. I don't care if I come back, just abduct me. Golly, go to Area 51, be like, I have gas money for you guys. What is it? Gas or grass? What do we need? Okay, so we're gonna exhale. You just felt my back shoulders pop. The association has done good things for over 100 years. The association is going to keep plowing in to the next 100 years. with our best interest in heart and dedicated, educated indigenous people like you at the helm, and we got this.
We got this. It's not going to be easy, right? But we just got to keep trucking, and stick together and find humor wherever we can. Pull out Reservation Dogs, or there's this movie that I watched. Someone's got to watch this movie with me and tell me what they think of it. It's a Lily Gladstone movie, and it's called what was it? It's not Psychedelic Cowboys. It's like someone's got to tell me the name of this movie. It's this weird, freaking mind-bending movie that includes animation as well as film. It's great. It's got an all-star cast. Look up Lily Gladstone and look at some of her movies that she's done. She's got incredible work. So anything we can do to kind of just keep feeding ourselves positive things. Like I keep, talking to our wonderful team at the association. It's like, get off freaking social media and nurture yourself, right? And if for us to be powerful, we have to feed ourselves good stuff, healthy food, things that give us strength, and things that also nourish our mind. I've been listening to a lot of John Trudell, the old school stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and older advocates readings, because I think we're forgetting some of the things they've been telling us about what's happening now for quite a long time, right?
Yes.
So I think we need to listen. We need to stay connected and feed ourselves things that bring us love and joy, and we'll get through this together.
Yeah, I've woken up every morning for one solid week with Iron Maiden's "Run to the Hills" stuck in my head. Like,
Run to the hills.
right? Run for your lives. That's literally like the most native song in my life right now. But our DNA has survived it and will continue to thrive it. And humor, so because why am I talking about my dad? Oh, because he texted me today, so he's just on my brain. We like Resident Alien on Hulu.
Yes. I love that.
Very good portrayal of Indigenous people, because it's not like desperately overdone. It's like, yeah, we have jobs, but yes, we also like carry these ideas and sacred things with us. So, and it's kind of funny. So maybe we'll just start like a positive Indigenous. Maybe that's what we'll share on social media. Not doom and gloom, but this made me laugh. This made me think. John Trudell and my pa were friends. I got to just piggyback that and smoke a bunch of weed.
Damn it, I missed that.
But I remember one of the earlier times that I was talking to John Trudell, just outside smoking. I was like, I'm your general. I'm ready. Let's go into battle. Let's fight it on. There is this like, we got to force change. And he was like, no, we don't, just hold steady and think and formulate your words. And, it bugged me because I was ready to set it all on fire and, go forth into battle as a strong Viking woman or whatever. Right. And that isn't the case. So a fight doesn't necessarily mean with arms and testosterone. It can be the battles you guys are fighting for us in the bigger picture, with words, with laws, with slowing down, with thinking and breathing first.
Absolutely. And it's not on our timeline. So this is not our,
Ooh, that bugs me too, but that's a whole different spiritual conversation.
Yes. Yeah, that bothers me too. But we don't know what the things that we do today are going to change what's happening tomorrow. So we got to just keep doing them.
Well, positive note, Leonard Peltier gets to go home in a few days.
There's some issues around that because we're all grateful.
Isn't it house arrest?
Isn't it
Basically.
what?
Isn't it just house arrest? Like he's still busted and he's still a felon and he's still a criminal record. They're just letting him like go home for health reasons or what?
Yeah,
You're a lawyer.
I haven't really looked into it. I think what I've been thinking about more versus the details of his what do they call it when they
Clemency.
Transmute? Yeah, clemency. Is more about his involvement and understanding of what happened with Anna Mae. If you've watched documentary.
That's a whole different thing.
That's a whole different thing. Like we're glad that he's out of.
I'm formulating because there's always more than one thing. So yes. I will talk to you off air about or maybe you can help me formulate my Freedom of Information Act request because I know things. I know other things. I know things, but I don't know how to bring it to light because here's another thing. Okay, so we have very few heroes. Am I going to be the one that comes out and tells some ugly truths about some highly regarded Indigenous leaders? Right? It's a whole other thing. Between you and my therapist, we're going to nail it. How are you getting through this, Jeff? Oh, I got a lawyer and a therapist. We're fine.
That might be the new, it's the new app. Your lawyer and therapist right on an app.
Can I legally punch this person? No. Okay, then I'll go to my therapist. So,
all right. Well, we got more talking to do then, Jen.
I know that you have a busy schedule. I look forward to what kind of comes out of the momentum after next month's conference and whatever I can do to support afterwards and keep this knowledge and this laughing at terrible things and all that. So we got one quick question. What can we do to press the new Secretary of Interior resist all wolves? Using the business side of tribal casinos and local communities, or is that something you need that we like? Do we just need to keep checking in with each other for this podcast on just little blurpy updates? Hey, guess what? You can't take away birthrights. And hey, guess what? Like, because I really do feel stronger with you in my back pocket.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good idea. If the association has any news or things that we can give you to share with folks, we'll do that. And Mitch, I appreciate your question. I don't know what we can do to press the new Secretary of the Interior. I'm not sure if he's been fully appointed yet. I'm trying not to watch this shit.
Well, we're dumping this on you, and we're like 2 weeks into it. We're like, are we going to die or not?
But you tell us, Mitch. Why don't you watch that for us and come back and let us know how those things are working? I know that there was something about gray wolves, but I don't recall what state it was. I think maybe Utah. It had to do with one of the Ute tribes and wolf relisting and protection. But tell us, Mitch, do some research for us and help us out here and help us get educated. It's always anyone out there listening to this, participate, be in community with us and help us do some good shows and get some information out there.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to figure out how to like wide font. I'm trying to read these comments without looking at my computer. Like, okay, so John says, and then I read it wrong. Shannon, thank you so much for being part of this. I know that you got stuff to do because you're the chieftress of it all, the head honchess of sorts. And we won't kiss the ring. We're going to kiss the beads.
Oh, yeah. Or my quill work. You can kiss my quill work.
Kiss my quill. So I'm going to take a lot of our conversations from the past few days to heart and really do some deep listening and not get stuck or paralyzed in that fear part of my brain, and keep breathing and keep remembering that we are here. we're here. We're still here, and we're going to be here.
Yes, absolutely.
And then maybe the association can have a just random cultural weapon making class someday. I mean, it's cultural.
Those darts. I want to do those blow dart things.
Yeah, this is our Batana from Brazil. Oh, Lord. All right. Well, I appreciate you hopping in to the red hoop with us. So I'm trying to come back here and remember like what buttons to press next. And
yeah,
it's too early to start drinking in Pacific Standard Time. And
nah, it's never too early.
all right. Well, that is it. Find us across the podcast platforms. And then Shannon, before I let you go, what is the best way if people have questions or want to contact you or the association, or kind of what is the best way to get involved with all this?
Yeah, so our website is indian-affairs.org, or just look at Association on American Indian Affairs on the web. We're, kind of like AAA. We're at the top of the list. And you can also email us at general@indian-affairs.org, and ask any questions, or if anything raised an issue with you, feel free to let us know. I mean, we want to make Jen's work for Red Hoop Talk, improve. If you have guests you want to share with us or whatever, please do that. And of course, check out our website. Oh, and then look, hey, who called me a nice white lady, said good night. So they continue their
okay. So Ken, how do we get Joe Rogan on the program? Like, I just stretched and flexed. Like, I'm so ready.
We'll stick it out there in the ether. Let's Joe Rogan come to our podcast.
Literally licking my claws, ready for this.
Now that would be fucking fun. That would be fun as hell. I did do kind of a mean thing to him. Do you want to hear it before we go out? It's
yes,
kind of
please.
closing. So he's not that tall of a guy.
I figured that because he acts like that.
He's kind of, and so we were taking pictures afterward, and I didn't feel like I had much affinity with him. He wasn't very giving. So when we were standing next to one another and taking pictures, I kind of put my leg out and I went, "Oh, is this better for you?" So yeah, I probably didn't. I'm a little bit of an instigator, so when people kind of piss me off, I will tend to poke at them a bit. So yeah, I don't know if he'd want to come back because I was kind of mean to him after.
Well, it's
white male ego. Sorry about that.
It's on, like, all this rage that I'm feeling. Like, if they can take out their anger and fear on us, like, why can't I do that to him for just an hour? National podcast. I don't know. Let's take him to some res land, some tribal territories, and see how he acts.
Oh, that would be fun. I would love to do that.
I got uncles and a daddy and cousins that don't like it when boys are mean to me.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. I love it when you get the big Indians out.
So.
Yes.
All right. Well, I defaulted back into raging war, but oh well, it is what it is. All right, Shannon, you have a glorious day. Thank you so much for enlightening us, and I look forward to this year. I know you guys got this. I know we got this.
Got it. Yes, we do.
And we are a capable, resilient, intelligent folk, and let's do this.
Yes, let's do this.
All right, girls, go then. All right, take it easy. Okay, that is it. I didn't mean to stress anybody. I'm stress sweating a little bit. Not trying to stress everybody out, but these are my real feelings. And I know that I'm not the only one feeling them, but I will also update y'all when I'm not feeling them anymore, right? I don't want to leave y'all hanging on the doom and gloom. And when I dust my butt off and chipper and feeling more confident, I'm not just going to leave you guys in the darkness either. So, okay. 2025, your guess is as good as mine. All right, till next month, y'all. We got Billy Mills Olympian, and maybe we can save some more issues for him. All right. Well, Chihilole, I love y'all so hard. We got to go. Where's my clips? Mom. All right.